Washington, D.C., April 30th, 2026. I hereby designate the period from Thursday, April 30th, 2026 through Monday, May 11th, 2026 as a district work period under Clause 13 of Rule 1. Signed sincerely, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to Clause 13 of Rule 1, the House stands adjourned until 10:30 a.m.
The lights are off in the halls of power right now, but make no mistake, the machinery of self-destruction, it is humming perfectly. Imagine a smoke-filled room where the leaders inside aren't mapping out a victory, but a funeral, their own funeral. According to the source material we're looking at today, the U.S. House of Representatives is basically operating like a ghost ship. Speaker Mike Johnson just pulled the legislative kill switch, sending the House away until May 11th. And it's not because the work is done. Oh no. This analysis argues he did it because his own people are actively hunting him down. It's literally a hostage situation where the captives would rather just burn the building to the ground than survive.
The reason I asked for the gentleman to yield to me is precisely the response we just heard. You know what really the problem is? People want to get home to fundraisers. People want to get home to dinners. People want to go back to their districts and go on trips. They have Codels. Meanwhile, the American people are wondering what on earth is happening in this town.
The gentleman will suspend. House will be in order. Gentleman is recognized.
Thank the Speaker. The American people are wondering what on earth is happening when they look at this body and see what we failed to do. We're continuing every single day to drive this entire country into bankruptcy. $40 trillion, government spying on the people, failure to stop government spying on the people, kill switches in cars, failure to stop sugar drinks going to children on the SNAP program voted by both sides of the aisle. And we go home and the American people say, what are you doing? Well, here we sit. And the response here is, please let us get on our flights so we can go home. Be away for 10 days.
The air in Washington is absolutely thick with political carrion right now. But you know what the most disturbing element of this entire collapse is? It's not the empty seats. It's the incredibly dark assessment that the people supposedly in charge have completely checked out. They are literally handing the pen over to their rivals, basically asking them to write the ending. And that forces a truly terrifying question. When a ruling faction just completely stops acting rationally, who exactly takes control of the fallout? If you think this is just, another messy week in politics, well, this explainer is going to show you why you are missing the most dangerous power transition in modern history. To really grasp what's happening, we have to view this through John Mearsheimer's framework of political realism. In this cold, hyper-brutal world, there is zero sentiment, there is only power. In a state of total anarchy, your only goal is pure survival, right? But here's the twist. The greatest threat isn't some external enemy at the gates, it's internal rot. It's a power structure that has completely lost its mind. And the unforgivable sin in this framework? Irrationality. Looking through this lens, the Republican Party has entered a terminal phase. They've traded actual survival for this irrational panic, turning into a collapsing star that's just pulling everything down into its own void. This perfectly aligns with the ancient, brutal wisdom of Baltasar Gracian, who said, "Life is war against the malice of men." You're always fighting on two fronts. The external front? Well, that's obvious. But the internal front? That is exactly where the knives are the sharpest. The analysis we are unpacking here details a toxic pathology that is currently shredding the GOP from the inside out. You have colleagues pretending to work for a common cause, while behind closed doors they are actively scheming to sabotage their own leadership. It's a deliberate, calculated strategy of one-upmanship. The entire goal is to make their rivals so utterly terrified that they just fall on their own swords. Now, history's actually seen this exact same pathology play out before. The source material draws an incredibly stark parallel to the Golden Age of Athens. You see, their downfall didn't come from a fair fight. It came from the art of one-upmanship taken to a pathological extreme. Enter Alcibiades, a man of immense charisma and, frankly, profound narcissism. This analysis draws a direct line, comparing his dominating presence to Donald Trump. It describes both of them as men who view the state entirely as a stage for their own personal glory, demanding conquests not because they make strategic sense, but simply to achieve absolute dominance. And standing right against Alcibiades was Nicias. He was cautious, desperate for order, and fatally inept. Our material maps Nicias directly onto Mike Johnson. Think about it. When Nicias tried to use pure logic, his rival just pricked the deep insecurity of the masses. The crowd roared. Nicias overreacted. Paralyzed by the sheer terror of his own constituents, he handed himself the exact rope his rival wanted him to use. This framework makes the case that Mike Johnson is caught in that exact same trap right now, utterly paralyzed by the blowback from his own base.
That ancient overreaction? It birthed the Sicilian expedition. Literally, the ultimate miscalculation in military history. Nicias was forced to lead a campaign he didn't even believe in, while his internal enemies sabotaged him from back home. And he refused to retreat until the entire Athenian fleet burned to ashes. They hung themselves with the rope of their own internal rivalries, and in doing so, they handed victory directly to Sparta on a silver platter. The historical warning here is severe. When you see modern leadership passing legislation that actively betrays its own base, you are watching the Sicilian expedition happening in real time.
The analysis then shifts gears into an even darker psychological warning. Let's look at the French Revolution. It shows us exactly what happens when the internal front becomes the only front. Maximilien Robespierre didn't build his power on consensus. He built it on the one-upmanship of fear. He created a literal court of malice. And according to our source, the GOP is currently living out its Robespierre phase. They're making lists of traitors. They're constantly threatening their own members with primary challenges. They are so incredibly consumed by winning this vicious internal war, they've completely forgotten how to win the external one.
But listen, this isn't just some abstract historical theory. It is actively bleeding into raw, present-day admissions. Representative Chip Roy did not mince his words. He publicly called the party's current state a fucking show. The trust is completely gone. When a party's own representatives are out there expressing a genuine desire to lose the majority just to put an end to the painful internal warfare, that's not a temporary setback. That is a full-blown structural collapse.
And we are seeing this rot translate into immediate legislative casualties. The escalation is already in motion. Just days ago, we saw the FISA 702 reauthorization. Mike Johnson pushed through the exact same warrantless surveillance tool that Donald Trump campaigned against. He tricked his own members with a withdrawn promise to ban central bank digital currencies. Then came the brutal sabotage of the Farm Bill, and now, looming right on the horizon, is the ticking time bomb of May 29th, the forced deposition of Pam Bondi.
These internal wars, they always result in absolute capitulations. Look at the total surrender of the Department of Homeland Security. Under this incredibly fractured leadership, not a single victory was secured for ICE. None. While these different factions are brutally battling each other for supremacy, the core objectives are completely abandoned. The machinery of governance is entirely consumed by the machinery of self-destruction.
The loss of legislative discipline right now is total. Take the Farm Bill, for example. This should have been standard, everyday business. Instead, it became this massive showcase for corruption. Leadership actually tried to slip in immunity for Bayer to protect them from lawsuits over cancer-causing glyphosate. This forced Republicans like Anna Paulina Luna and Thomas Massie to publicly fight their own leadership just to avoid being labeled pro-cancer by their constituents back home. Much like terrified Jacobins, they're desperately looking for any way out before the blade falls.
And then, the collapse of the cover-up. The source material labels the Epstein files the third rail of American politics. And leadership? Well, they just grabbed that rail with both hands. By utterly failing to stop the subpoenas and completely botching the protection of Pam Bondi, the radioactive fallout is spreading rapidly. The party is essentially broadcasting to the world that it is no longer capable of protecting its own secrets.
So who actually benefits from this total meltdown? The opposition. Hakeem Jeffries doesn't even need to be brilliant right now. He doesn't even need his party to be perfectly unified. According to this analysis, he simply needs to remain blameless and clean. By just standing back and letting his rivals overreact to every single subpoena and every failed bill, Jeffries is practicing the ultimate form of warfare. He is just letting his opponents hang themselves. He just has to wait quietly at the bottom of the scaffold. But while the leaders play this highly lethal game of one-upmanship, the ground-level consequences are brutally severe. The House goes on vacation, and the actual machinery of the country flatlines. TSA workers go completely unpaid. 48 million Americans are out there struggling to afford food at the grocery store. The voters are watching these completely unforced errors with a growing cold fury. The leaders have abandoned their posts, and the real-world impact is accelerating fast. In the face of this kind of systemic failure, what do we see? frantic, desperate distractions. High-level political suicide is being contrasted with bizarre, almost surreal spectacles. You have Representative Dan Muser getting visibly triggered on camera by TMZ reporters. You have Ron DeSantis gerrymandering maps down in Florida. The analogy the source makes here is absolutely brutal. It is exactly like a dying man trying to frantically rewrite his will while the heart monitor flatlines in the background. They are trying to rig a game they've already completely lost the skill to play.
Mearsheimer's warning echoes so clearly through this entire analysis. In the pursuit of power, if you lose your rationality, you lose absolutely everything. Strategy has been entirely traded for sensationalism. The rope is taut, the drop is coming. The Democratic Party isn't even really winning in the traditional sense. They are simply inheriting an empire that was way too busy fighting itself to even notice the gates were left wide open. The only question left to answer is this: when the floor finally falls out from under them, will you be surprised by the sound of the snap?